The grand hall of the Galactic Council shimmered with light from 1,000 worlds. The air itself felt alive, glowing faintly blue as energy from distant suns flowed through the chamber's crystal walls. It was a place built to show unity, where dozens of species gathered to share peace, trade, and knowledge. But on this day, the air carried tension. At the center of the vast circular hall stood a single human, Ryan Hale, wearing his old silver armor. The armor was not shiny or new. It carried scratches, marks of travel, and burns from past missions. It was not meant to impress. It was a symbol, a reminder that humans had once been explorers, fighters, and dreamers who survived even when the galaxy doubted them. Across from him stood the Council, rows of alien leaders sitting behind floating glass panels that displayed their homeworld's banners. Their voices overlapped, each speaking in tones of concern and pride. "Human colonies are unstable," said Councillor Dreven, a tall reptilian being with scales like glass. "Their trade agreements are late, their fleets are weak. We cannot rely on such a fragile species." Another joined in. Commander Tyrell, a broad-shouldered warrior from the Thurn Empire. "Humans think courage can replace discipline. They act on emotion instead of order. It is dangerous." The voices rose one after another. Ryan listened silently, his hands clasped behind his back. He had been trained for this, to represent humanity with calm dignity. He didn't come to argue. He came to speak truth, but before he could, a familiar voice cut through the noise. It was Alira Veth, the ambassador from the planet Eltara, and the one he had called his ally. She had been one of the first to stand beside humans when the Galactic Council had doubted their worth. She had defended them when others mocked their small fleets and simple technology. Her words had carried weight, and now her voice trembled not with anger, but disappointment. "Perhaps," Alira said slowly, "it is time humans stop pretending they belong among us." The room fell silent. Every sound, every breath stopped. Ryan froze. He looked at her, at the calm face that once smiled at him across endless meetings and long missions. Her silver eyes avoided his. He wanted to believe he'd misheard, that her words were twisted by the echo of the hall. But no, she meant them. His heart felt heavy, but his face stayed calm. "Pretending?" Ryan asked quietly. His voice was low, steady. Alira did not answer. She looked down at the glowing platform beneath her feet. Around her, other council members shifted uncomfortably. Some nodded. Some looked away. Ryan's fingers tightened around the strap of his armor. He could feel the metal's familiar weight against his chest, the same armor that had saved him countless times during missions where no one else had volunteered to go. The same armor that had stood against storms and darkness. He took a slow breath. "When Earth joined this council," he said, his voice echoing across the vast chamber, "we didn't come asking for favors. We came to stand beside you, to learn, to help. Humans have always stood together, not because we were strong, but because we never gave up." Commander Tyrell laughed softly. Strong words for a species that loses more than it wins. The laughter spread through a few corners of the room. Ryan did not respond. Instead, he slowly reached up and unlocked the seal around his armor's chestplate. The soft hiss of air echoed louder than any laughter. Piece by piece, he began to remove the armor, the chestplate, the gauntlets, the shoulder guards. Each clink of metal against the marble floor rang clear, cutting through the tension like a slow rhythm of farewell. The entire hall watched in silence. Even Alira's eyes lifted, surprise flickering across her calm face. When the last piece was laid down, Ryan stood in his simple undersuit, plain, gray, unremarkable. He looked at the circle of leaders once more. "You think humans don't belong?" he said softly. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we don't belong here, among those who measure worth by power or perfection." He paused, his eyes meeting Alira's. "But we do belong somewhere, among those who still dream when the stars seem too far away." Then he turned away. No one stopped him. No one dared. The echo of his footsteps filled the chamber, steady, quiet, final. The heavy doors opened automatically, and a bright beam of sunlight from Varen's twin suns streamed into the hall. For a moment, his silhouette was outlined in gold, his figure small but proud, and then he was gone. The silence that followed was long and uncomfortable. Commander Tyrell crossed his arms. "Emotional as always," he muttered, but Alira didn't reply. Her gaze remained on the spot where Rian had stood. The light still glowed faintly on the marble floor, where the shape of his armor reflected the morning sun. She remembered the time, years ago, when that same human had saved her ship from being lost in a storm of plasma clouds. He had risked his life when the rest of the fleet had pulled back, and now she realized she had just broken something that could never be replaced. The council resumed its debates, pretending nothing had happened. Reports, data, trade discussions, the usual flow of words filled the air again. But none of it sounded the same. Something unseen had shifted. Far from the council's grand walls, Ryan walked through Varen's open streets. The city glowed under twin suns, filled with tall glass towers and wide walkways that curved above streams of silver water. Aliens of many kinds moved around him. Tall beings of light, small traders with metallic skin and floating spheres of pure energy. Some stared at the unarmored human. Others ignored him completely. He didn't mind. His steps led him away from the shining heart of the city, toward the older districts built by the first settlers, the ones who had come here to work, not to rule. There, among small markets and crowded homes, life felt real. The air smelled of metal, dust, and food cooked by simple hands. A small child, blue-skinned with wide, curious eyes, tugged at his sleeve. "Mister," the child said softly, "are you a soldier?" Ryan smiled faintly. "Not anymore." The child tilted his head. "Then why are you sad?" Ryan paused. For a moment he didn't know what to say. Then he knelt, meeting the boy's bright eyes. "Because sometimes people forget what makes us strong," he said gently. "And sometimes we have to walk away to remind them." The boy nodded, though he didn't fully understand. He ran off laughing as his mother called him from a nearby stall. Ryan stood up, looking at the wide horizon. The suns hung low, painting the sky in orange and silver. The sight reminded him of Earth, of sunsets over the mountains, of oceans that reflected fire and light. He missed that world, but he also knew this was where humanity's test had truly begun. Behind him, far away in the council chamber, Alira sat alone after the meeting had ended. She couldn't shake the image of Ryan walking away. The sound of his armor hitting the floor replayed in her mind. Each echo felt heavier than the last. For the first time, she wondered if the galaxy's oldest council had made a mistake, not by accepting humanity, but by failing to understand it. Because humans didn't need permission to belong. They proved it every time they refused to give up, and though Ryan had walked away somewhere deep inside, she knew his story was not over. Days passed since the moment Ryan Hale had placed down his armor and walked away from the Galactic Council. The image of his quiet departure still echoed in the memory of those who had witnessed it. Some called him a fool. Others said he had shown pride unfit for diplomacy. But a few, very few, understood the meaning behind his silence. The planet Varen, home of the Council, continued to shine as if nothing had happened. Its crystal towers reached toward the sky, and its energy fields hummed with order and progress. Yet beneath the perfect glow, something had changed. A small space that Rian used to fill, a human voice of reason, warmth, and strange courage, was missing. In the council chambers, Ambassador Alira Veth found it difficult to focus. Every day she attended the same meetings, spoke the same careful words, and listened to endless debates about trade routes, defense treaties, and planetary politics. But her thoughts always drifted back to Ryan. She remembered how, when others argued, he used to listen first. When tempers rose, he found calm words to bring people together. She had admired that quiet strength, though she never admitted it aloud. Now, in his absence, the hall felt colder, emptier. That evening, she stood before the large observation window of the council spire. The twin suns of Varen were setting, their light turning the clouds to gold. She whispered softly to herself, "Maybe I was too harsh." Her aide, a small creature with crystal eyes, looked up. "Ambassador, did you say something?" Alira shook her head. "No, just thinking." Far from the council, Ryan had left the shining city behind. His path led him across the wide plains outside Varen's capital, a land of silver grass that waved under the light of two suns. He walked without hurry, without a clear destination, guided only by the quiet inside his heart. He had given years of service to the council, believing that humans could earn respect by showing patience and wisdom. Yet in that single moment when Alira's harsh words struck him, he understood something deeper. Respect could not be demanded. It had to be felt. And sometimes silence spoke louder than argument. Ryan reached a small settlement near the desert's edge. It was a place built by workers from many worlds, a mixture of alien engineers, miners, and travelers who came to Varen for work and never returned home. There were no golden towers here, no shining halls, just simple homes made of stone and metal, and people who lived with quiet strength. He found a place to stay in a workshop owned by an elderly alien named Morrow. Morrow had thick, gray skin and kind, glowing eyes. He had seen humans before, but not many. "You don't talk like the others," Morrow said as Ryan helped him repair an old water pump. "You're not here for trade or politics, are you?" Ryan smiled faintly. "No, I'm just passing through," Morrow grunted. Passing through? That's what all travelers say. But travelers leave something behind even when they go. They worked side by side for hours, tightening bolts, connecting pipes, testing the flow of energy through the pump's circuits. Ryan found comfort in the simplicity of the work. Here, no one asked for titles or speeches. Only hands and heart mattered. When night came, he sat outside the workshop watching stars fill the sky. The constellations were different from Earth's, but they glimmered with the same mystery. The air was cool, and a faint wind carried the scent of metallic dust. He closed his eyes and thought of home, of green forests, blue oceans, and the faces of those who had once believed in humanity's dream among the stars. He wondered what they would think if they saw him now, sitting in silence, far from the council's light. The council falters back in the capital. The council's unity began to crack. Without Ryan's careful balance, old disagreements resurfaced. Commander Terrell demanded stronger military rules. Councillor Drevin refused cooperation with smaller colonies. The peaceful discussions that Ryan once guided turned into bitter arguments. One morning, Alira stood before the assembly watching the tension rise. "Without human mediation," one diplomat shouted, "our treaties are falling apart." "They never belonged here anyway," Terrell snapped. "Let them deal with their own problems." Alira's voice broke through the noise. "That is enough." The hall quieted. She took a deep breath, her silver eyes hard. "You all laughed when Ryan walked away. But look at us now. We are fighting over pride, while the problems we came to solve remain untouched." The council fell into uneasy silence. Her words carried truth, though none wished to admit it. After the meeting ended, Alira stood alone by the window again. Her reflection stared back at her, tired, uncertain. She remembered Ryan's final words. "Maybe we don't belong here, among those who measure worth by power or perfection." Those words had not been anger. They had been truth, and now she understood their weight. Ryan's quiet strength life in the settlement moved simply. Ryan became part of the small community. He helped repair machines, build shelters, and teach children about the stars. Many of the settlers had never met a human before. They were surprised at his patience and warmth. One young worker named Leon often followed him, asking endless questions. "Is it true humans can live anywhere?" he asked one morning. Rian smiled. "We try. Sometimes the place shapes us. Sometimes we shape it back. Why did you leave the council?" the boy asked suddenly. Rian paused. He looked toward the horizon where the suns were rising again. "Because sometimes walking away teaches others to listen. Words can only do so much." Leon didn't fully understand, but he nodded respectfully. Later that week, a group of traders visited the settlement. They carried news from the capital, and with it whispers of growing trouble. Supply routes were delayed. Cooperation between worlds was breaking down. Some said the council might soon lose control. Morrow listened quietly, then looked at Ryan. "Seems your friends up there are learning what happens when they forget the small people." Ryan sighed. "They'll find their way." "They always do, though sometimes it takes losing something to remember what matters." Morrow studied him for a long moment. "You care for them, don't you?" Ryan nodded slowly. "Yes, even now." That night, as he sat under the stars, Ryan thought of Alira. He remembered her eyes, cold in that moment, but once filled with curiosity and hope. He wondered if she regretted her words. A part of him hoped she did. Another part hoped she didn't, because pain often taught truth. He lifted a small piece of metal from the ground, a fragment of his old armor that he had carried with him. It gleamed faintly in the starlight. He turned it in his hands and whispered, "We'll find our place, one way or another." A message from the stars. A few days later, a ship descended from the sky, stirring dust across the settlement. Its hull bore the silver crest of the Galactic Council. The people stopped their work and watched as the vessel landed softly near the main square. A tall alien stepped out, Envoy Tell, a neutral messenger of the Council. His voice was deep and calm. "I come with a request," he said, addressing the crowd but looking straight at Ryan. Ryan stood still. "A request?" "Yes, the Council seeks your assistance," Tell said. "There is unrest between the outer colonies. They asked for your guidance," the crowd murmured in surprise. Even Morrow looked impressed. "So they come to the man they cast aside," he whispered. Ryan shook his head gently. "No, Morrow, they're not coming to me. They're coming to what humanity stands for, the part that listens when others don't." Tell extended a small device that shimmered with blue light. "Ambassador Alira herself sent this message. She says she was wrong." Ryan hesitated. His heart tightened at her name. He took the device and Alira's image appeared, a hologram formed of soft light. "Ryan," her voice said, steady but full of regret. "The Council has forgotten what it means to be humble. You were right. I was wrong to doubt you, please. If not for them, then for me, return. We need you." The message faded. For a long moment, Ryan said nothing. The wind moved gently through the silver grass and the suns glowed above. Finally, he looked at Morrow and the settlers around him. "Sometimes," he said softly, "walking away is the first step to coming back stronger." He looked at the horizon once more, the direction of the shining city he had left behind. The silence that once meant farewell now carried a different sound, the calm before a new beginning. And so, Ryan Hale, the quiet human who had placed down his armor and walked away, prepared to return not as a symbol, not as a soldier, but as something far greater, as a reminder of what humanity truly was. The suns of Varen rose once more, painting the skies with orange and gold. The light touched the small settlement where Ryan Hale had been living, turning every piece of metal and stone into something warm and alive. For many weeks he had worked beside miners, traders, and builders, fixing broken tools, repairing energy lines, and teaching children about the stars. He had grown used to this quiet life. Every morning he would walk through the dusty streets, greeting the people who now smiled when they saw him. To them he was not a diplomat, not a hero, not even a human representative. He was simply Ryan, the man who listened, helped, and never gave up. Yet that morning felt different. The messenger's ship that had come a few days ago had changed something inside him. The words from Ambassador Alira Veth still echoed in his mind. "You were right. I was wrong to doubt you. Please, when I return, we need you." He could still hear her voice, a calm filled with regret but also with hope. It was strange how the same voice that had once wounded him could now give him strength again. Ryan stood outside Morrow's workshop, watching the suns climb higher. Morrow, the elderly alien who had given him shelter, joined him quietly. "You haven't said much since that message," Morrow said. Ryan smiled faintly. "I've been thinking. About going back?" "About what going back means," Morrow nodded. "You left because their words cut deep. You stayed because you found peace. But peace doesn't always mean the end of the road." Ryan looked at the horizon. "You're right. Sometimes peace is just the place where we gather strength before facing the next storm." He walked toward the small hut where he kept his few belongings. On a shelf, the metal fragment from his armor still gleamed faintly. He picked it up and turned it in his hands. It was only a small piece, but it carried memories of battles, of missions, of standing among the stars for something greater than himself. "I thought walking away was the right choice," he said softly. "Maybe it was. But now, maybe it's time to return, not for pride, but for purpose." The Council in crisis while Ryan stood in silence. The Galactic Council was in chaos. The meeting chamber, once full of calm discussion, now echoed with angry voices. Trade routes between allied worlds had broken down. 2 colonies were on the brink of war over shared resources. Energy shipments had been delayed for weeks, and smaller planets accused the Council of favoring the powerful. Ambassador Alira tried to restore order. Her voice rose above the noise. "Enough. We can't solve anything if we keep blaming each other." Commander Terrell slammed his fist against the table. "Then what do you suggest, Alira?" "The humans are gone. Your human friend left because he couldn't handle the truth. Her eyes hardened. He left because we refused to listen. Drevin hissed, his reptilian eyes narrowing. You speak as though the council depends on one man. Alira met his gaze. Sometimes one man reminds the galaxy what unity means. Her words silenced the room for a moment, but only briefly. The councilors soon returned to arguing, their pride too strong to admit the truth. Alira sat back in her chair, feeling helpless. For years she had believed that logic and order were enough to keep peace. Now she saw that what held people together was not rules. It was trust, compassion, and heart. The very things humanity had brought into the stars. That night, as she returned to her quarters, she looked out of her window at the city lights far below. Varen looked beautiful as always, but the beauty felt hollow. She whispered to herself, Ryan, I hope you heard my message, because we truly need you now. The return 2 days later. A small transport ship entered Varen's orbit. It was old and simple, carrying no banners or insignia. The guards at the docking station were surprised to see who stepped out, the human who had walked away in silence weeks ago. Ryan Hale. He wore no armor this time, no formal uniform. Just a plain gray jacket, travel-worn boots, and the same calm expression that had once unsettled even the proudest leaders. When the station officers saluted him, he only smiled and said, No need for that. I'm just here to help. News of his return spread across the city faster than light. By the time he reached the council tower, a small crowd had gathered outside. Workers, traders, and settlers, both human and alien. They had heard of him through stories, through whispers of the quiet human who had stood his ground with dignity. Many raised their hands in silent respect as he passed. Inside the great chamber, Alira stood waiting. When she saw him, her voice caught in her throat. Ryan, she said softly. He stopped a few steps away. Alira. There was no anger in his tone, no bitterness, only calm understanding. The silence between them said more than words ever could. I didn't expect you to come back, she admitted. I didn't expect to either, he said with a faint smile. But the galaxy rarely goes as planned. The council members entered one by one, curious and uneasy. Commander Tyrell frowned deeply, but even he said nothing. The hall grew quiet as Ryan stood at the center once more, the same spot where he had once placed down his armor. The speech Ryan looked around the hall slowly. When I first came here, he began, I believed that the council was the heart of the galaxy, that here among all these voices we could build something better. Together. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the faces watching him. But then I learned something important. The heart of the galaxy doesn't beat in these halls. It beats out there, in the colonies, in the ships, in the people who work and dream and hope even when we forget them. The room remained silent. When I walked away, he continued, I thought I was leaving behind failure. But I found strength. Not in armor, not in titles, but in ordinary people who never stopped believing that unity was possible. That's what makes us human. That's what makes anyone truly alive. The will to keep trying when everything seems lost. Alira's eyes shone. Even the usually stern Commander Tyrell lowered his head slightly. Ryan stepped closer to the council table. You all have power. More than most will ever dream of. But power means nothing if it's not guided by heart. If we forget compassion, then all our stars and cities will turn cold. He looked at Alira. It's not too late to remember why we came together. We can still rebuild but not as rulers, as equals. For a long moment no one spoke. Then slowly Alira rose to her feet and bowed her head. You're right, she said softly. You've always been right. The other counselors followed her example, some awkwardly, others with quiet sincerity. Even Commander Tyrell gave a slow nod of respect. In that single moment, the tension that had built for weeks seemed to dissolve. The council was silent, not in pride this time, but in reflection. The new beginning. The following days brought change. With Ryan's guidance, the council began working again, not through authority, but through cooperation. He helped reconnect the broken trade routes, arranged open talks between rival colonies, and sent teams of engineers to repair damaged supply stations. His methods were simple but effective. He spoke to everyone, miners, captains, diplomats, and listened to their concerns. He reminded them that no problem was too small, no voice too weak. Alira often watched him as he worked. Sometimes she joined his meetings. Sometimes she just listened quietly. She could see how his calm presence changed everything. The people trusted him not because of power, but because of honesty. One evening, after a long day of planning, they stood together on the balcony overlooking Varen's skyline. "You changed this place," Alira said softly. Ryan smiled faintly. "No, we changed it. I just reminded everyone what they already knew." She turned to face him. "I never apologize for what I said before." "You don't have to," he replied gently. "Your words helped me see what I needed to understand." Alira looked at him with quiet gratitude. "You still carry that piece of your armor, don't you?" Ryan nodded. "Yes, it reminds me that strength doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it means walking away until others are ready to walk with you." They both stood in silence, watching the stars appear one by one. Somewhere far away, a new fleet of ships left Varen, a joint mission between humans and alien allies. Their first in many years, hope had returned to the galaxy, not through force but through faith. As the night deepened, Ryan looked up at the stars, bright, endless, full of possibility. The same stars that had once watched him leave now seemed to welcome him back. He smiled quietly and whispered, "Maybe we do belong here after all." And the stars in their silent light seemed to agree. The galaxy, though vast and bright with countless stars, had its dangers. Even on a peaceful planet like Varen, nothing remained predictable. Weeks after Ryan Hale returned to the Council, a new crisis unfolded, one that threatened everything the humans and their allies had worked to rebuild. It began quietly, with small tremors in the energy grids that powered the floating citadel of the Council. The city above Varen's surface glimmered with energy fields, clean power flowing from fusion stations and solar arrays. But slowly systems began to fail. Lights flickered. Communication networks dropped signals. Supply ships were delayed. At first, the Council tried to solve the problem with their usual methods: meetings, debates, reports. Engineers from the capital scurried from one terminal to another, trying to balance energy flows, reroute power, and stabilize the systems. Yet each solution seemed to create another problem. "Something is wrong," said Councillor Dreven, his scales bristling with frustration. "These grids should have handled the load." "Nothing like this has happened before?" Commander Tyrell slammed his fist against the console. "We must act faster. If the core fails, the entire city will collapse." Ambassador Alira Veth stood quietly among them, her silver eyes calm but worried. She had learned over the past weeks that panic solved nothing. Still, she could feel the weight of the situation pressing down like a heavy shadow. "I think we need," she began but paused. Every traditional method had already failed. She realized as she looked around the room that the Council was trapped by its own rigid thinking. A call across the stars far below, in the settlement where Ryan had spent weeks before returning, a communication beacon blinked softly. It carried a signal from the Council, a simple message: "We need your help. Now." Ryan had been walking through the quiet fields outside the city, watching the twin suns rise above the horizon. When the message arrived, he felt a familiar weight in his chest. Not fear, but responsibility. He had returned to the Council to guide them, and now they truly needed him. He activated the beacon, sending a simple acknowledgement: "I'm on my way." Ryan's mind moved quickly. He did not waste time with hesitation. Unlike many counselors, he did not rely solely on rules or hierarchy. Instead, he thought creatively, considering what others would overlook. He recalled the energy grid's design, systems that were strong but inflexible, built by engineers who expected every variable to behave perfectly. Life, he knew, was never perfect. The human Touchrian arrived at the Citadel's energy control center hours later. Engineers and counselors bustled around him, trying to fix the failing grids. Systems flickered and beeped, alarms ringing as warnings flashed across every terminal. He looked at the panels, listening to the reports. "The grids are overloaded," one engineer said. "If we push any further, we risk shutting down the city entirely." Ryan nodded. "I see, but what if we don't push harder? What if we think differently?" The engineers exchanged confused glances. Humans, they thought, could only react emotionally. Yet Ryan's calm presence demanded attention. He began walking among the terminals, touching wires, checking connections, and asking simple questions. Where is the main junction? Which circuits can be rerouted without shutting down life support? Which systems can run manually? Every answer led him to a solution no one else had considered, a combination of old Earth engineering and creative improvisation. He proposed rerouting energy from non-essential systems, using manual backup generators in parallel with main power lines, and stabilizing the grids step by step. While he worked, he spoke calmly to the engineers. "You've done well. These systems are complex, yes, but we can fix this if we work together. Remember, technology is only as strong as the people who use it." For the first time in weeks, the alarm lights stopped flickering. Slowly, power returned to parts of the city. It was not perfect, but it was enough to stabilize the situation temporarily. The storm approaches as the council celebrated the first signs of recovery. A new warning appeared on the monitors. A massive cosmic storm was approaching Varen's system. Solar winds and high-energy plasma could easily disable the floating city's defenses and collapse the energy grids completely. Councillor Drevin froze. "There is no time. We must evacuate." Commander Terrell's jaw tightened. Evacuation would be chaos. We cannot risk it. Alira's eyes met Ryan's. "The storm is faster than any defense we can mount. We may lose the city if we rely on technology alone." Ryan nodded slowly. He had seen storms like this in his travels. Unpredictable, relentless, and dangerous. But he also knew that calm thinking, combined with human creativity, could turn even the worst situation around. He quickly drew up a plan, combining old protocols with new ideas. He divided teams into sections, one to manually control the energy flow, another to stabilize communications, and a third to monitor the storm's progress. Every system was connected through redundant circuits he had improvised himself. "Remember," he said to the teams, "we are not alone in this. We have knowledge, tools, and each other. That is more than enough to face the storm." The room fell silent as the storm drew closer. The distant sky glowed with plasma and fire, a reminder of the power of nature beyond the stars. For a moment, fear crept into the minds of many counselors and engineers, but Ryan's calm, steady presence reminded them that courage was not the absence of fear. It was action, despite fear. Ryan's leadership hours passed as Ryan worked tirelessly, coordinating teams, monitoring energy grids, and checking the city's defenses. He spoke with each engineer personally, listened to every concern, and adjusted plans on the spot. During a particularly tense moment, one of the backup generators failed. Alarms rang and some engineers began panicking. Ryan stepped forward, placing a hand on the console. "Stop, take a breath. You've already done the hard work. Now we finish it calmly." He quickly rerouted circuits manually, improvising connections using spare energy lines. Lights returned. Systems stabilized. The storm outside roared, but inside the citadel, calm prevailed. Alira watched him in awe. "He's incredible," she whispered. "He's not just a human. He's a reminder of what humans can do." Ryan glanced at her and nodded. "We all have that inside us," he said. "Sometimes we just need a challenge to show it." The turning point as the storm hit its peak, Varen's cities trembled under the cosmic winds. Energy fields flickered, warning lights flashed, and alarms blared. But the human-led teams remained focused. With Ryan guiding them, manual adjustments kept the city alive. Ships in orbit, previously at risk, were now able to communicate safely with the Citadel. Energy shields held firm against the plasma waves. For the first time, the Council realized that rigid rules alone could not save them. They needed human intuition and courage. When the storm finally passed, the damage was minimal. The city stood intact, the grids stabilized, and communications restored. Engineers and counselors alike stood in awe of what had just occurred. They had faced one of the most dangerous storms in Varen's history and survived, not because of their technology alone, but because a human had reminded them how to think, act, and lead, the lesson learned after the storm. Ryan walked slowly through the control center. The exhausted engineers and counselors were busy repairing minor damages, but their spirits had changed. Confidence replaced fear. Collaboration replaced pride. Alira followed him quietly. "You didn't just save the city," she said softly. "You reminded us why we are here. Not to rule, not to compete, but to work together." Ryan nodded. "Sometimes a crisis shows more than a problem. It shows character. It shows who is willing to learn, adapt, and help." That is the strength humans have always carried, and it's what any species can carry if they try. The council members began to understand what had been missing before. Not structure, not rules, not speeches, but heart, creativity, and the ability to act when it mattered most. Hope restored as the night settled over Varen. The twin suns had set, leaving the sky filled with stars. Ryan stood on a balcony overlooking the city. He could see workers fixing streets, children laughing in the streets, and ships quietly returning to their docks. The city, though shaken, had survived. Alira joined him. "They will never forget this," she said. "They will not," Ryan replied. "And neither will we. Every challenge reminds us what matters. Every storm shows us the way forward." For the first time since the storm began, the humans smiled faintly. The crisis had tested everyone, and they had passed. Humanity had once again shown the galaxy its quiet power, courage, ingenuity, and the will to act when others hesitated. And in the distance, beyond Varen's skies, the stars waited silently for the next challenge, a reminder that the galaxy would always need those who dared to face the unknown. Ryan placed his hand on the railing, feeling the weight of responsibility and yet also the lightness of purpose. Humanity had survived the test, and now, more than ever, it was ready to inspire the galaxy once again. The days on the planet Varen had passed peacefully since Rian's quiet return to the council. The halls that once echoed with arguments now felt calmer. Everyone had seen how he worked with patience, reason, and steady hands. Yet even peace can change in a moment, and soon Varen would face a challenge that would test every soul living upon it. The first signs, it began one bright morning when the sky shimmered strangely. A deep vibration moved through the floating citadel that hung above Varen's surface. The power lights flickered for only a second, but that second carried worry. The citadel depended on powerful energy grids drawn from the planet's core. Without them, the city would fall from the sky. At first, the council engineers believed it was only a minor fault. They worked quickly, making small adjustments, confident they could fix the issue before noon. But as the hours passed, more systems began to fail. Communication screens went dark, lights dimmed, and the air filters slowed. The hum of the city changed from calm to uneasy. Councillor Drevin, whose voice always carried command, stood before a large holographic map. "This is impossible," he said. "The grids are stable for centuries. They cannot fail like this." Commander Terrell, a tall and proud warrior of the Thurn race, replied sharply, "Machines do not respect pride. They respect skill. We must repair them, not argue." Ambassador Alira Veth remained silent. Her silver eyes scanned the data streaming across a broken monitor. She remembered how Ryan used to observe first and speak later. The council had learned that silence could mean wisdom. The energy level dropped again. This time, entire sectors of the city lost power. The shields that protected the citadel from the harsh winds of Varen began to weaken. Panic spread quietly among citizens, calling the human. "Send for Ryan Hale," Alira said finally. Some councillors hesitated. A few still carried doubt about trusting a human with technical leadership. But the crisis was too dangerous to let pride stand in the way. A message was sent at once. Far below, Rian was visiting the workers who lived near the lower platforms of the citadel. He preferred to spend time with those who fixed machines rather than those who argued over them. When the message arrived, he read the short text, "Council requests your help immediately." He sighed gently, not with frustration but understanding. "All right," he said, picking up his small repair kit. "Let's see what we can do this time." Arrival at the control center. The main control center of the citadel looked like a storm of lights and sound. Dozens of species moved around the circular room, speaking in hurried tones. Ryan entered quietly, without armor, without rank badges, wearing only a simple worker's suit. Still, when he stepped in, the noise softened. People remembered the calm authority in his voice from before. He moved to a console, studying the numbers. "You have too many automated systems running at once," he said softly. "You're trying to fix the grid using the same logic that broke it." One engineer frowned. "What do you mean?" Ryan pointed at the main energy flow diagram. "This design works only when everything is perfect. But nothing in the universe stays perfect forever. You need flexibility." "Flexibility?" the engineer repeated. "Machines do not bend," Ryan smiled. "Then let's make them." The human way, he asked for manual control, something the council rarely allowed. Together with a team of young technicians, he began redirecting energy step by step, taking power from decorative lights, art displays, and empty administrative towers to feed hospitals, water systems, and shield generators. While others feared breaking rules, Ryan moved with quiet confidence. He spoke kindly to every person, asking for help instead of giving orders. "Can you open this panel?" he asked one technician. "You know it better than anyone." The technician nodded and worked faster, encouraged by the respect. Within hours, parts of the citadel began to shine again. Basic power returned. People could breathe easier. Yet the main core, the heart of the energy grid, still shook violently. Something deeper was wrong. The storm that evening, as the suns dipped low, the first waves of the cosmic storm reached Varen. It was not a normal storm, but a sea of charged particles traveling through space, strong enough to melt shields and destroy ships. The Council had known such storms existed, but never one so strong. It struck like a glowing curtain of fire spreading across the upper atmosphere. In the Council hall, screens went black one after another. The planet trembled. Commander Terrell shouted, "Shields are falling! We must abandon the Citadel." "No," Ryan said firmly. "If we flee, the lower cities will burn. The storm will tear them apart. We must hold the shields until it passes." Counselor Drevin shook his head. "That's madness. We will all die here." Ryan turned toward him. "Not if we work together." His calm voice cut through the noise. Even those who doubted him stopped arguing. There was something about the human's tone, a quiet strength that carried hope. Alira stepped forward beside him. "He is right," she said. "Panic will destroy us faster than the storm, working against time." The storm roared louder outside. From the control windows, the sky looked alive with light. Each flash sent a wave of power into the city's grid. Circuits overheated. Sparks danced across metal floors. Ryan ordered teams to split into small groups to handle different sections of the city. He worked with his hands as well as his mind. When a converter melted, he crawled into the maintenance shaft himself to replace it. When a cooling pipe burst, he used a piece of spare cable to seal it until others could repair it properly. Every action was practical, simple, and effective. Alira followed his instructions from the control room. She watched him through a communicator screen, his face calm even as the walls around him shook. "You should come back to safety," she said once. Ryan shook his head. "Not yet. If I stop now, the power chain will fail. Keep the others steady." His words gave her strength. She turned to the counselors. "You heard him. Do your part." The turning point hours passed. The storm grew wilder, painting the sky in white and violet. Several power lines failed completely, and for a short time, darkness covered the city. People feared the worst. Then Ryan's voice came through the speakers, clear and strong. "Grid link 3 is down, but backup line 4 is online. Switch to manual transfer now." Alira repeated his command. The engineers obeyed instantly. Lights flickered once more, then returned brighter than before. The backup system held. The city floated steady again. Rion climbed out from the shaft, covered in dust, his hands shaking slightly from exhaustion. He looked through the window and saw the storm finally starting to fade. Slowly, the violent light softened to a calm blue. The Citadel had survived. After the silence, when the last wave of energy passed, quiet filled the control room. Everyone looked around in disbelief. They had done it. Against every prediction, the city stood unharmed. Commander Terrell stared at Ryan for a long moment. The proud warrior finally lowered his head slightly, a gesture of respect. "You were right, human," he said. "We needed more than rules. We needed heart." Counselor Drevin stepped closer too. "I misjudged you," he admitted. "I thought courage was noise. But yours was silent," Ryan smiled faintly. "Courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just keeps working until the job is done." Alira approached him last. Her silver eyes softened. "You saved us all," she said quietly. "If you had not returned," Ryan raised a hand. "No one saves alone. Every one of you made this possible. That is how peace survives." Lessons in the aftermath. The following day, Varen's skies were clear again. Repair teams worked across the city, fixing what had been damaged. But now they worked differently. There was laughter in their voices and cooperation between species that had once avoided one another. Ryan walked through the corridors, greeting people by name, helping wherever he could. Many stopped to thank him. Some bowed. Others simply smiled. He accepted each gesture humbly, never as a hero, only as someone who had done his part. When he reached the observation deck, Alira was waiting for him. Together, they looked out over the floating city. The suns were rising again, coloring the clouds gold. Ships flew safely between the towers, their lights bright and peaceful. "You've changed them," Alira said softly. "No," Ryan replied. "They changed themselves. I just reminded them that survival begins with trust." She turned to him. "Then that is the truest power humanity has, trust that leads to courage." He nodded. "Maybe that's our armor now." For a long time they stood there silent, watching the sunrise spread across Varen. The storm had tested them, and they had endured. Not because of the strongest machines, not because of grand speeches, but because one human reminded the galaxy that heart and will could hold even a world above the storm.